not Christian Francis, but he works under our team at the CMM in our Environment and Natural Resources Department. So my name is Alyx MacDonald. I'm the Director of Environment and Natural Resources at Confederacy of Mainland Mi'kmaq. I've worked there for about 10 years. Not a community member myself, but have worked and lived in the Millbrook and surrounding area for most of my life. Come from a forestry background. My father was a forester, grandfather worked in natural resources, and had more of a career in fisheries, and then had the opportunity to move back into a more natural setting for myself. So, and I wanted to highlight, unfortunately Christian couldn't come due to some family matters he attend to, but him and I were talking a while ago, and he's our little highlight there. He's a community member and our IPCA coordinator, so which is Indigenous Protected and Conserved Areas. So when looking through some woodlot management guides for my father, I stumbled across an article about Pictou Landing's community woodlot, which back in the early 2000s, late 90s, was the first FSC certified woodlot here in Nova Scotia for our Mi'kmaq community. So it's about 1,000 acres that they manage all around Hosseg or Boat Harbor. So Christian is a local to the area, and thought it'd be great to highlight a bit of his experience. So as I joked before, he had a start of a music career and made a little shift back to forestry. His father is also the lands manager for the community now. So we saw him as a natural fit to kind of continue his dad's work and work with us on IPCAs, which I'll explain a little bit further on. So, didn't have a picture up on the slide, but it's just an excerpt from their community woodlot management plan. So the community, the Pictou Landing, but then down below it's all the lands around Boat Harbor. And they've been managing that for the community use for the last 30 years. The main focus of that is to provide back to the community. They utilize it for, they've had several projects over the years of starting their own community female-focused construction company, which was started in the 90s. They also have highlighted and used it as a place for the community. So they don't do a ton of management beyond protecting species at risk, such as black ash, which is important for basket making. A lot of the work that's done there is to kind of manage it for community and recreational use rather than timber. So I'm going to go over a couple brief, little brief history of Mi'kmaq presence here and a couple concepts utilized a lot by our communities. So the Mi'kmaq have been rooted in Mi'kma'ki for about 13,000 years, dated. Many community members will say time immemorial. So they are the original stewards of this land. As I was saying in Debert, they'll soon be building a state-of-the-art cultural center, which will house artifacts both from that site and across the world that are being brought back here and brought back home. They're nearing getting their funding completed, where it's about a $30 million project and split between the province, the feds, and themselves, near completion at their portion of the funding through large donors and community members and communities at large. So, and just for centuries, the Mi'kmaq people have been the stewards of this land, and they've utilized it for the richness of its resources, and that they have a vast knowledge of this land. It's just kind of similar to once you've been on and your family has managed a woodlot for so long, you kind of have a sense of it and a history that kind of does translate from generation to generation. And one thing I always like to highlight in this work, especially for folks is that not all Mi'kmaq people feel the same way, like not all woodland owners feel the same way about how to manage and look at forests and the land as a resource. Just something I really wanted to highlight there as we move forward. A little bit of history here for those that may not know. There was traditionally 7 districts in Mi'kmaq, so it would be essentially the Atlantic provinces at this time. And we sit here in Pictou, which is the area where explosive place and lying in the water. So this area, even before they knew there was coal mines to be developed here, there was natural fissures that would form. So this area was always known as being explosive, and so that is why there's other areas which are like Sabagnay, which is where the wild potatoes grow. That'd be the regions along the Shibby River and up into Halifax. But it is kind of interesting to note how specific this region was compared to other areas. So it's more of a warning and kind of acknowledge that things happen in this area. So the Wabanaki forest, which would have been the traditional forest of the region, I always like to highlight this as when you're naming things and just the importance of that and seeing it through that light. And there's a lot of research being done on what the Wabanaki forest would have looked like pre-contact. And we have our Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq communities. I just wanted to highlight that we have the CMM provide programs and services to all those 8 mainland communities, which is Wassahoba, or formerly Acadia, Bear River, Sabagnay, Annapolis Valley, Kluskap, Buckingag, Millbrook, and Pictou Landing, which is not too far from here. And the community itself, the lands that they currently have there, and many other purchased lands and lands across this area. So there's 2 ways of knowing that are utilized by the Mi'kmaq here that really hit home the importance of stewardship and sustainability. So Netaglimp, which is the use of the natural resources provided by the Creator. So it encompasses Mi'kmaq sovereign law and guides individual and collective beliefs and behaviors. It's really focused on resource protection, procurement, and the management of that area. Often said as looking 7 generations forward. So today was saw that we had the 7 generations of family Woodlot, and that's how communities do look at the lands that they manage. Looking 7 generations forward, taking only what you need from that area, just like in the Woodlot and woodland owners here. And Edawuktumuk, or two-eyed seeing. So it's a concept coming from Medina and Albert Marshall in Winnemagi, Cape Breton. So it's taking the Western science approach, or the Mi'kmaq science, or local knowledge, taking those aspects. And taking the best of both to taking approaches to what we do. So I often say to our team, a lot of what we do isn't in the scientific rigor, but we do take the best of that, making sure that we do surveys in a strategic way, but also taking the knowledge from community members or local land knowledge to utilize that to make better predictions. Because often there is that aspect of people are on the land and give a better prediction of what's actually there. A lot of times, some species may be seen as at risk or limited, where it's just because people aren't looking for the right areas. And I just wanted to highlight a couple of community initiatives that our team does that are related to forestry initiatives. So what is Mi'kmaq forestry? I think beyond just timber forest harvest, we do a lot of other work. Looking at traditional timber species, that is something we do with much of the work, which I'll highlight later. We do programs with Port Hawkesbury Paper, Mi'kmaq Forestry Initiative, which is a partnership with the province governments and the 13 Mi'kmaq communities to manage former Bowater lands, as well as our own community woodlots like Pictou Landing and others. So we also look at non-timber forest products, foraged goods, crafts, and medicines. So a lot of the work we do is about finding lands and trying to help provide access to community members who often, for a long time, were unable to leave the communities and have lost that connection that they once would have had to the land. Cultural experiences, products, ecotourism, so that's something that's big in the province, and we're trying to push for community-led tourism. Education initiatives, land-based learning, so that's one of the key things we really do is trying to teach the youth. A colleague and I would have sent over a adult beverage last night. We talked kind of about the work we do, and sometimes, even though I'm not that old, I get a little old and jaded at times, but the youth are always excited, and I always see a positive aspect. And that's the work we really do at our organization around the forestry work and natural resources. It's really pushing that importance of connecting youth back to the land, trying to avoid always having kids on iPads and kind of getting going in the woods again. Carbon and climate change mitigation and offsetting work. So that's work we're looking into, what that would look like, enhancing lands, and what does different carbon capture look like as we move into new government opportunities for funding, and utilizing some of that revenue to then have projects that are more community-led rather than government-funded initiatives that we often find are very narrow lens that don't meet community needs. And yeah, we do a lot of modern forestry work as well, so it's a good combination of what we do. So some of the current initiatives, like I said, forest management services. So we do work on our community woodlots, and down in Wassahoba, they have their own mill, Gardeners Mills area, and some other communities are looking at their own small timber forest co-ops. So we have our Mi'kmaq Forestry Initiative, which we work with two other Mi'kmaq organizations, the 13 Mi'kmaq communities, as well as the province on managing former pulp and paper lands throughout the province, which I'll highlight a little bit later here. And we also have technicians now that work with Port Hawkesbury Paper, so it's a collaboration with them to have community members involved in that process as they do block layouts, management plans, and then also kind of learning on the job, as well as providing a kind of a secondary assessment approach to the work that's being done. So yeah, non-timber forest product work. I'll highlight a project here that's focused on that. Like I said, on the land, learning traditional practices, trying to get you back out on the land and finding new ways and opportunities to have that take place. Species at risk and invasive species management. We have teams that are working on hemlock-related delta work. Emerald ash borer is a really pressing matter for us as we look at ash trees, especially black ash, and look at sustainability and how to highlight a project here shortly that highlights how we want to kind of continue sharing knowledge even when we could lose a species in the future. Climate adaptation planning, so both from a community infrastructure aspect, but also looking at land in the same way, working with the province now on flood mapping and how that may affect infrastructure, but also community lands and other lands within the province. Earthkeeper network, so we call them earthkeepers or land stewards, so across the province, with Parks Canada, provincial areas, and community lands, having essentially go-to people in the community that can kind of show folks through communities, help provide access to medicines and foods, and also be someone that they can go to and learn from. These wouldn't be like your natural resources officers, but they'd be kind of go-to people in the community that they would know, hey, this is what I can go to figure out where to go to access these things and to learn more. And some of the work now we're really highlighting is Indigenous protected and conserved areas, which Christian is our Coordinator for communities. I'll highlight 2 areas of interest that we're working towards securing land and working with the province to utilize Crown land for long-term protection. So a lot of text on here, but I really want to highlight this one project, which when I came onto the team, taking over the unit about a year ago, this was one of the projects, the White Ash to Basket project, which really highlighted the work that I think is really important for us to do. Essentially, we had a series of workshops, and this work was built off how to connect community through a really complex subject like cumulative effects. So how do you talk about all the effect that's happening in an area, pre-contact and current, and how you would assess that for future development moving forward. Really hard thing to even explain now, and a really hard concept to get to the general public and community. So with our work now, it's reconnecting community to these practices and showing how the effect of the loss of an area may affect traditional practices and resources. So we've worked with an elder who adapted and has used white ash instead of black ash. Black ash is split a lot more fine, a lot easier to work with, but he's always worked with white ash and trying to show community members, because black ash is a species of risk here in the province, a lot harder to get, and with the emerald ash borer, which is coming into, essentially trying to document, share these techniques with Nugwe Pictos from Buckingham, and he's one of our earth keepers, and part of that work is sharing the knowledge moving forward. This work is, starting with selecting, which I'll highlight here in the next photos. The first work, which I know on the photo of here, is they're looking for the best ash tree they can find, something that's straight, no knots, so that when they harvest it, they can utilize as much as possible for like strips and will easily quarter. So we've set up workshops where we take folks all through the process, starting with selection of the tree, cutting it, quartering it in the woods, checking for EAB to make sure they're not bringing that with them, then processing it and making the strips, which we won't see here. So we did it in stages where those that were able to come for the whole stage, we could see the whole process. We also kind of did like a cooking show, where we brought the different pieces out, so you see the different stages in a smaller classroom setting there. We try to get youth, elders, and community members together. A little bit different, but another project from that, another way of explaining this process was around sweetgrass, which was really important in communities and often harder for them to find and access. And our team often heard it was hard to grow sweetgrass, transplant it, and move it. We've started looking at some small techniques that we use by communities in creating community beds of sweetgrass in the community, so they have access to it and it's near them and easier for elders and others to access. So that's some work there. The Mi'kmaq Forestry Initiative, so it's a province-wide initiative with 2 large areas of land that we steward and work with our 13 communities on to implement more ecologically focused forestry. As we see that the communities can look at different practices, and it's not something that we are looking at economic gain from only. We are trying to look at ways to have own source revenue, continue that moving forward, but to manage that at a much smaller scale, and essentially look at opportunities for community members to utilize and for harvest, but also for access. I'm trying to set up sustainable forestry that way. So this is one area, is the St. Croix block, which is not too far from Windsor. So that area, we won't see there, but there's some community land that's right at the top, which is actually some of the best old growth forest I've ever seen. So that was one of the highlights I've had time here, is seeing the last land and community land that we can purchase to create larger areas, but that are also managed as they're being utilized. And that's a concept that a lot of community members don't like about conservation. It's just leave it and forget it. And communities have always said that they've lived their time immortal, and that what's the importance of protecting the land if there isn't that human connection? Same with salmon and other species. Why are you protecting them? It's not that connection piece. Just a little bit of the operations to date. So this has only been ongoing really for the last 10 years. The first 5 are really kind of the development, all the unfun things that I deal with now, negotiating contracts, happy, which never happens. But the first kind of work they started working on was commercial thinning, single tree selection, and irregular shelter wood, utilizing maturity, creating opportunities for multi-age diverse forests. So some of these areas were more pulp and paper, so I'm trying to do that slowly over time, but also areas where it makes sense to either clear cut and start again or look at other techniques moving forward. So it's not just ecological forestry, it's looking at the whole matrix of the area and getting community feedback and involvement in the work. And a lot of the first work was road building and operating, which needed to be done. So a lot more focus now is on community engagement, awareness, building and recruitment, how to get community more involved in the forestry sector, but in a way that makes sense and also isn't completely reliant on funding, which is often difficult in these aspects. Community-led projects and businesses, like I said, even access to resources for making baskets. If we can find areas and almost treat the forest as an ash stand for basket making, or keeping white birch so that they could be peeled properly and made into canoes to continue that tradition. Not that they're utilized that way anymore, but those are the ways that we're trying to look at having connection to the forest. Long-term agreements in place, so we're looking at longer than 5 years, looking at 10, longer 20-year agreements with the province. So eventually this could be fully Mi'kmaq led, but now it's co-managed. Data collection and research. Again, it's often hard with the over 70% private landowners to always get permission, and that's always something we want to do before collecting data. But having larger areas like this that we can do more long-term data sets and provide information moving forward. Business planning, partnerships, expansion, and diversification. So like I said, looking at how do we set up communities to maybe have their own processing mill, or to have their own access to stud wood, to build small buildings. Some of the communities are now looking at how do they look at long-term, where they maybe want to have more smaller homes brought into the community rather than invest in large homes, especially as some communities' populations will change. And looking at ways to help support entrepreneurs that want to get into this business or just manage the lands. We've just started a new 5-year management plan, which we hope will continue to longer management plans moving forward. Indigenous protected and conserved areas, which is kind of Christian's main role. And I won't go into full detail here, but for those that know, United Nations Declaration of Rights of Indigenous Peoples, so it's UNDRIP, in Article 29, was Indigenous people have the right to the conservation, protection of the environment, and the productive capacity of their lands and territories for resources. So the treaties that were signed, those were between 2 sovereign nations, and this is that first step. This MFI work is one of those first steps towards how to the Crown and Canada reconcile with the communities and those sovereign nations. And Truth and Reconciliation Commission, one of the key recommendations was reconciliation is about establishing and maintaining a mutual respect relationship between Aboriginal or Indigenous and non-Aboriginal peoples in the country. And for order for that to happen, there has to be these larger initiatives which happen over time and bring awareness to, and just the importance of recognizing the treaties that are in place. And what is an IPCA? So the crew that was here at the beginning, I said conservation isn't a term that many community members like because, again, it's almost like set it and forget it, which is not the Mi'kmaq way. Like I said, Mi'kmaq have been here in time immemorial, and they feel that having people on the land, knowing the land and managing it is much more important than leaving it, as we said. And putting that pushback even on the federal government, as we've seen similar work happens all across the country, or all across the world. In New Zealand and Australia are two of the world leaders in this work. We've seen that those countries allowed a lot more community-led initiatives in those lands that are managed. Canadian government felt it was more on the conservation side. Communities feel that it's more about land management moving forward, making the best decisions, trying to have industry in places that will be less impactful, and that's a lot more of the work that's being done, and all the work we do is educating that that's a lot of the concern, rather than saying, it's going to go back to a way it wasn't. It's more about how do we try to protect the environment while also allowing for community to prosper and surrounding communities as well. So while IPCAs can vary in the terms of governance and management, there are generally three essential elements. So they're Indigenous-led, they represent a long-term commitment to conservation, in our case, long-term management and care of the land, and they elevate Indigenous rights and responsibilities. So as we said, we're working with the province on several key areas, as well as in Cape Breton, to establish these areas that can be managed long-term moving forward, and even looking at different types, instead of calling something a provincial park, calling it Indigenous protected and conserved area, and showing that we'll have people like earth keepers and communities involved in that management moving forward, and showing the province and ourselves can manage and lead to better management of the land moving forward. So we have three areas that our team really has focused on. The Assembly of Nova Scotia Mi'kmaq Chiefs set forward a few key areas. To the right, to the bottom left, we have the Bussituig or Gaspereau Lake. That area is currently dammed by Nova Scotia Power, but has recently found 30,000 artifacts plus. So that's a land, an area that's being managed, and we're looking at buying some lands, as well as working with Nova Scotia Power in the province on how to best protect those lands and provide access to the community. With the Mersey corridor on the right, and this would be a very important new route and travel route, an area that was utilized by the communities from essentially the Kedgie area all the way to the shore, and Bedford petroglyphs. So that's an area that we're looking to help protect moving forward. For those that aren't aware, there's the Bedford Barren site and several areas nearby which found to have Mi'kmaq star. Which you can't see the best, but from what I hear from the team, when you put some water over it, you can see it fairly well, and it's a symbol that was used by the communities, and still you saw some of the logos before, one of the prominent symbols for the communities